This is the Lockpicking Lawyer, and what I have for you today is a really neat old Bulgarian padlock that was sent to me by Bosnian Bill. So Bill, thank you very much for all of the locks you sent my way. The construction of this padlock is pretty interesting. If we look at the bottom, we can see that it has a barbell-shaped profile with one end of that barbell hollowed out to act as the lock body. And then presumably we would have the Bible extending up through this thin center section, and that's where our springs and driver pins would be located. If we look at the side, we can see how this was probably put together. This padlock body was formed in one piece, and then they drilled out the Bible from the side, and we can see the plugs they used to fill those holes in. This is probably a 5-pin lock with a 6th hole right here to put in a retaining pin to hold that core in place. We also have some writing on the front of this lock, and I did my best to figure out what that is for you. I think the top line is the word Rodina with a miss stamp because we're missing a small line right there, probably a broken stamp from the looks of it. And Rodina in Bulgarian and actually also in Russian means motherland. So that could be what they mean by that. Or it could also be the name of the city in which this lock was made. Rodina is a town in Bulgaria. The middle line, I do not know what that means. And the bottom line is 2.50 lev, and that's actually the price. Lev is the Bulgarian currency, and some of you may be thinking that's a little bit strange to have the price of a lock stamped onto it permanently from the factory, but it's actually something that's relatively common for padlocks produced under communist regimes during that time period. And I have a lock right here. I took a couple out of my cabinet. This was made in the 1980s in Russia, and you can see this is 2 rubles, 80 kopek. And I have another lock here. This was made in Latvia in the 1970s. And if we look at the back of this, we can see it's 2 rubles, 40 kopek. So a relatively common phenomenon, even if it feels a little bit strange to us. If we actually think about the socialist system under which these locks were produced, the command economy, and how prices were set, it actually makes sense that they would stamp the price onto the lock because the prices weren't going to change. It's not like they were sent to a store which had discretion about how much to charge for it. But enough about the socialists. We're going to see what it takes to pick open a socialist lock. We have a pretty open keyway here, big enough for me to fit a 50 thousandths pry bar in the top of the keyway there, and I'm going to use a standard hook in 25 thousandths. Okay, 1 is binding, lifting him up. Got a nice fat click there. 2 is binding. Click out of him, little movement on the core. 3 is loose. 4 is binding, got a click there, and 5 is binding. And that opened the lock up. So it felt like all standard pins, nothing terribly difficult to open. Let's take a look at the locking mechanism here. We can see on the end of the shackle there is a small T formed by machining, and that T gets trapped in between a couple of pieces of brass. Let me see if I can turn this so you can get a better idea of how that would work. You can see how that core would turn and trap that T in place. And actually, if we take a close look at it, it looks like this lock may have been forced at some time. Usually when you see these, there is a solid bar that goes across on both sides, and it looks like that little T-shape may have been forced through it at some point. And now that I'm looking at this, I can actually see possibly some hammer marks on the top of the lock. So maybe at some point this was forced. I have seen locks similar to this, including the Slovenian lock that I featured in my video number 366. It was the Titan K. And usually when we see locking mechanisms like that, They make those bars out of steel, and I'll show you on, this is that Titan K. If you look carefully in there, you can see those rotating, there we go, those rotating steel bars. On this Bulgarian lock, they appear to be made out of brass, and that's probably why this lock could be forced open. So this lock has a bit of a history to it. I don't have a key to it, so no additional information about it, but certainly an interesting old Cold War era lock. So, Bill, thank you very much for sending this my way. To everyone else, if you have any questions or comments about it, please put them below. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, have a nice day. Thank you.